The arrival of Donald Trump in the White House in 2017 marked a significant shift in American environmental policy. Trump's approach, characterized by a focus on economic growth and deregulation, had profound implications for wildlife and conservation efforts across the nation. His policies, often met with both praise and criticism, sparked intense debates about the balance between economic development and environmental protection. This essay will delve into the key actions and policies of the Trump administration concerning wildlife, examining their impact on endangered species, national parks, hunting regulations, and land management practices. Trump's approach to wildlife conservation differed significantly from his predecessors, emphasizing what he saw as burdensome regulations hindering economic progress. His administration sought to streamline permitting processes for industries like oil and gas, potentially impacting sensitive habitats. This approach raised concerns among conservationists about the long-term health of America's natural heritage. However, it also resonated with those who felt that environmental regulations had become overly restrictive, stifling economic growth and job creation. The Trump era witnessed a renewed focus on traditional uses of public lands, such as hunting and fishing. This resonated with many rural communities who rely on these activities for both sustenance and recreation. However, it also raised concerns about the potential impact on wildlife populations and the delicate balance of ecosystems. The debate over how to best manage America's vast public lands, balancing the needs of wildlife with the interests of various stakeholders, remains a complex and contentious issue. Trump's legacy on wildlife conservation is likely to be debated for years to come. His policies, often driven by a desire to reduce regulations and promote economic growth, had both positive and negative consequences for America's natural heritage. Understanding the nuances of these policies and their impact is crucial for informed discussions about the future of wildlife conservation in the United States. The Endangered Species Act, or ESA, a cornerstone of American environmental law, faced significant challenges during the Trump administration. Enacted in 1973, the ESA has been instrumental in preventing the extinction of numerous species, providing a safety net for wildlife on the brink. However, critics argue that the act can hinder economic development and private property rights. One of the most significant changes proposed under Trump was the revision of the ESA's definition of critical habitat. This revision aimed to narrow the scope of areas designated as essential for the survival and recovery of endangered species. Conservation groups argued that this change would weaken protections for vulnerable species, making it easier for development projects to proceed in critical habitats. They pointed to the potential loss of habitat for species like the sage grouse and the Florida panther as evidence of the risks posed by these changes. Another point of contention was the administration's efforts to streamline the process for removing species from the endangered list. While supporters argued that this would allow for more efficient allocation of resources to species in most need, critics expressed concern that it could lead to premature delistings, leaving species vulnerable to renewed threats. The debate over the ESA highlights the ongoing tension between conservation goals and economic interests. Despite the proposed changes, the ESA remained largely intact during Trump's presidency. This was due in part to legal challenges from environmental groups and pushback from some members of Congress. However, the Trump administration's efforts to weaken the act underscored a philosophical shift in how the government approached endangered species protection. This shift, emphasizing economic growth over environmental regulations, has left many conservationists concerned about the future of the ESA and the species it protects. Central to the Trump administration's energy policy was the concept of energy dominance. This approach championed increased domestic production of fossil fuels, often prioritizing energy extraction over environmental concerns. This had significant implications for wildlife and their habitats, particularly in areas rich in oil, gas, and coal reserves. The administration's efforts to expedite permitting processes for drilling and mining operations raised concerns about potential impacts on sensitive ecosystems. One of the most contentious decisions was the administration's approval of oil and gas drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, or ANWR, a vast and pristine wilderness area in Alaska. This decision, long sought by the oil industry but opposed by environmental groups, opened the door to development in a region considered vital for polar bears, caribou, and migratory birds. The potential for oil spills and habitat fragmentation posed significant risks to these species and the delicate Arctic ecosystem. Beyond ANWR, the Trump administration's push for energy development extended to public lands across the West. This included efforts to reduce the size of national monuments such as Bears Ears National Monument in Utah, which had been designated for their ecological and cultural significance. Reducing the size of these protected areas opened up more land for potential energy extraction, raising concerns about habitat fragmentation and the long-term health of wildlife populations. The emphasis on fossil fuel extraction also had implications for climate change, a growing threat to wildlife worldwide. The Trump administration's decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement, a global accord aimed at combating climate change, drew international criticism. Scientists warned that climate change is already impacting wildlife, altering habitats, disrupting migration patterns, and increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. America's national parks, often called America's best idea, faced new challenges during the Trump administration. While expressing support for the National Park Service, or NPS, the administration also pursued policies that raised concerns about the long-term health of these treasured landscapes. These policies focused on increasing access for recreational activities, potentially at the expense of conservation goals. One significant change was the administration's efforts to expand hunting and fishing opportunities within national parks. This included revising rules to allow for the use of bait and other controversial hunting methods in some parks. While proponents argued that this would help control wildlife populations and promote outdoor recreation, opponents expressed concern about the potential impact on predator-prey relationships and the overall ecological balance within park boundaries. Another point of contention was the administration's approach to park funding. While Trump signed the Great American Outdoors Act, a bipartisan bill that provided billions of dollars for park maintenance and infrastructure, his administration also repeatedly proposed deep cuts to the NPS budget. These proposed cuts, though ultimately rejected by Congress, raised concerns about the agency's ability to adequately protect park resources and manage visitor impacts. Section 5. The Call of the Wild: Shifting Priorities in Hunting Regulations. The Trump administration ushered in significant changes to hunting regulations, reflecting a broader shift in wildlife management priorities. These changes, often supported by hunting groups but opposed by animal welfare organizations, sparked debate about the ethical and ecological implications of hunting practices. The administration's approach emphasized what it saw as traditional hunting methods and sought to expand hunting opportunities on public lands. One of the most controversial changes involved the administration's decision to overturn a ban on the use of bait and other controversial hunting practices on federal lands in Alaska. This decision, praised by hunting groups as a victory for states' rights, was met with condemnation from animal welfare organizations that argued it would lead to cruel and unsporting hunting practices. They pointed to the potential for non-target animals to be harmed by traps and bait intended for other species. The administration also took steps to make it easier to hunt predators such as wolves and grizzly bears on public lands. This included removing federal protections for gray wolves in several states, a move that was celebrated by ranchers concerned about livestock depredation but condemned by conservationists who argued that wolves play a vital role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. The debate over predator management highlights the complex and often conflicting values associated with wildlife. Section 6. Casting a wide net, expanding opportunities for anglers. In line with its focus on increasing access to outdoor recreation, the Trump administration implemented policies aimed at expanding fishing opportunities across the country. These policies, Welcomed by recreational anglers and the fishing industry, sought to streamline regulations and open up more waterways to fishing. However, they also raised concerns about the potential impact on fish populations and aquatic ecosystems. One significant change involved the administration's review of a rule that restricted the use of lead fishing tackle in national parks. This rule, implemented during the Obama administration to protect wildlife from lead poisoning, was opposed by some anglers and fishing industry groups who argued that it was overly burdensome. The Trump administration's review of the rule, though it did not result in its repeal, highlighted the ongoing debate over balancing recreational fishing with the need to protect wildlife from harmful pollutants. The administration also sought to expand access to fishing in marine protected areas designated for their ecological significance. This included reviewing the boundaries of marine national monuments established to protect sensitive marine habitats, with an eye toward potentially opening up some areas to commercial fishing. This proposal was met with resistance from conservation groups who argued that it would undermine the purpose of these protected areas and threaten the health of marine ecosystems. Section 7. Public lands, private interests. Navigating the complexities of land management. The management of America's vast public lands, encompassing millions of acres of national forests, grasslands, and other federal lands, has long been a subject of intense debate. The Trump administration's approach to public lands management reflected a shift in priorities, emphasizing resource extraction and recreational access, often at the expense of conservation goals. This approach sparked controversy and legal challenges from environmental groups who argued that it prioritized private interests over the long-term health of public lands. One of the most significant actions taken by the Trump administration was the reduction in size of two national monuments in Utah: Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. These monuments, designated by previous presidents using the Antiquities Act, protected areas of significant ecological, cultural, and paleontological value. The administration's decision to reduce the size of these monuments, a move unprecedented in modern history, opened up these lands to potential mining and drilling, sparking outrage from environmental groups and Native American tribes who consider these lands sacred. The administration also implemented changes to the Bureau of Land Management's planning process, making it easier for energy companies to lease public lands for oil and gas development. This included reducing opportunities for public comment and environmental review, raising concerns about transparency and the potential for environmental damage. The Bureau of Land Management, which manages more public land than any other federal agency, plays a crucial role in balancing competing demands on these lands, including energy development, recreation, and conservation. Section 8. Funding the future. A mixed bag for conservation efforts. The Trump administration's approach to conservation funding was characterized by a mix of cuts and increases, reflecting the administration's competing priorities of fiscal conservatism and support for certain conservation initiatives. While the administration oversaw significant investments in park infrastructure and public lands access, it also proposed deep cuts to environmental protection programs, raising concerns about the long-term viability of conservation efforts. One of the most significant conservation achievements during the Trump administration was the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act in 2020. This bipartisan bill, hailed as a landmark victory for conservation, permanently funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund at $900 million per year. The Land and Water Conservation Fund, a program that uses royalties from offshore oil and gas drilling to fund conservation and recreation projects across the country, had long been a target for budget cuts. The permanent funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund was seen as a major win for conservation efforts, providing much-needed funding for land acquisition, park maintenance, and outdoor recreation infrastructure. However, the administration also repeatedly proposed deep cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal agency responsible for protecting human health and the environment. These proposed cuts, though ultimately rejected by Congress, reflected the administration's skepticism of environmental regulations and its desire to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. The Environmental Protection Agency plays a crucial role in enforcing environmental laws, conducting scientific research and protecting the quality of our air, water, and land. Section 9. Conclusion: A legacy and the balance. Donald Trump's presidency left an indelible mark on American environmental policy, including its approach to wildlife conservation. His administration's policies, often driven by a desire to promote economic growth and reduce regulations, had both positive and negative consequences for the nation's natural heritage. Understanding the complexities of this legacy is crucial for informed discussions about the future of conservation in the United States. On the one hand, the Trump administration oversaw significant investments in park infrastructure and public lands access, notably through the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act. This landmark legislation provided much-needed funding for conservation and recreation projects across the country, ensuring that future generations can continue to enjoy America's natural beauty. Additionally, the administration's focus on expanding hunting and fishing opportunities resonated with many rural communities and outdoor enthusiasts, highlighting the importance of these activities for both economic and cultural reasons. On the other hand, the administration's efforts to weaken environmental regulations, prioritize fossil fuel extraction, and reduce the size of protected areas raised concerns about the long-term health of wildlife and their habitats. The administration's rollback of environmental protections, coupled with its skepticism of climate change, sparked fierce opposition from environmental groups and scientists who argued that these actions would have dire consequences for the planet. The debate over the Trump administration's environmental legacy is likely to continue for years to come, as the long-term impacts of its policies on wildlife and ecosystems become clearer.